The asteroid that killed the dinosaurs didn't end them when it struck. The killing took days. Billions of fragments of rock and vaporized ground were flung above the atmosphere. And when they came back down, the sky itself became an oven. This is what that day actually felt like. The explosion was the easy part. 66 million years ago, the planet was the warmest it had been in 100 million years. There was no ice at the poles and no freezing winter anywhere on Earth. The world was a greenhouse, and almost everything alive had adapted to thrive inside it. The air hung thick and wet, and the ground underfoot was soft, always warm, never frozen. Ferns stood taller than a grown human, and the canopy above was so dense that light rarely reached the forest floor. Humidity pressed against your skin like a damp cloth. How warm was this world? Crocodiles lived inside the Arctic Circle, and the ocean's surface was so hot that deep water barely cooled. Dinosaurs roamed from equator to the highest latitudes without pause. Nowhere on Earth was cold enough to slow them down. The sounds of that world never stopped. Insects droned in every direction while dinosaurs called across distances the warm air carried without effort. Water ran through rivers wider than any alive today. Slow and hot over stone that hadn't felt cold in a million years. The light filtered through dense canopy in columns of gold and green, hitting a forest floor that never dried out. The horizon was a wall of vegetation in every direction, no open sky for miles. Everything painted in the deep, saturated tones of a world that had never known frost. This wasn't a world recovering from disaster, and it wasn't a world in transition. It was a world at the top of a long, stable run, the kind that makes extinction feel impossible. Life had been winning for longer than anything alive could remember. Then, 66 million years ago, on an ordinary morning, the light came. A point of brightness, sharper than anything that sky had ever held, growing larger and hotter by the second. It had been traveling toward this exact coordinate for millions of years. It was always coming. The rock was 12 kilometers wide and moving at 20 kilometers per second. Its destination was a shallow sea covering what is now the Yucatan Peninsula. Nothing in that water could have stopped it. Beneath that sea, buried in the limestone, sat a thick layer of gypsum, sulfur-rich rock that had been sitting there peacefully for millions of years. It was inert and unremarkable. It had no reason to matter. The gypsum had been harmless for eons. That was about to change. 66 million years ago, the Yucatan Peninsula was a shallow sea covering limestone and gypsum roughly 100 kilometers across. The asteroid struck at 20 kilometers per second, faster than sound, faster than anything the planet had ever absorbed. Then was the impact. The energy released was equivalent to 100 million gigatons of TNT. The ground liquefied for miles in every direction. The ocean above the strike point vaporized instantly. Every drop, every creature, every trace of water turned to steam and hurled skyward in a column of white heat. The seabed cracked open. Rock that had been solid for millions of years became liquid in a fraction of a second. A crater 150 kilometers wide opened in the ground, deep enough to swallow mountain ranges. Wide enough to contain small countries. The blast threw a wall of water a kilometer high toward every coastline, faster than any wave in history. The shock wave circled the planet as a magnitude 11 earthquake, felt everywhere at once. Nothing alive within 1,000 kilometers of the impact survived the first minute. The asteroid struck at roughly 45 degrees, the angle that maximized what was thrown upward. Degrees of inclination, the exact trajectory that hurled the most debris into the upper atmosphere and beyond. A few degrees steeper and more energy would have gone straight down into the mantle. A few degrees shallower and more material would have skipped off into space. But this angle, this exact angle, turned a regional catastrophe into a planetary execution. Some say a steeper angle would have been worse. Others say shallower wouldn't have mattered. Neither explains why the ground itself was the real weapon. The impact didn't just throw rock. It vaporized the gypsum beneath the seabed, that sulfur-rich layer that had sat inert for eons, and launched trillions of tons of sulfur aerosols alongside the debris. The mineral that had been harmless underground became a chemical weapon the moment it touched the sky. Trillions of tons of rock, dust, and vaporized mineral were now above the atmosphere, suspended in the vacuum of space, spreading outward in an expanding cloud. They had nowhere to go but down. If the asteroid had struck almost anywhere else, the effects would have been catastrophic but contained. The ground it hit, that specific combination of sulfur and shallow sea, made this the worst extinction in nearly 200 million years. The debris was already falling back, trillions of tons re-entering the atmosphere at orbital speed. The sky was about to become something no living thing had ever endured. The debris re-entered the atmosphere within hours. Not as a single event, as a continuous global bombardment. Trillions of fragments, each one superheating the air around it as it fell, each one turning the atmosphere into plasma and fire. From pole to pole, the atmosphere heated like the inside of a kiln. The air at ground level rose past the temperature of a broiling oven. Animals on the surface weren't burned. They were cooked. This was the gypsum returning. That inert mineral buried beneath the Yucatan, now vaporized and mixed into the debris cloud. The sulfurosols amplified the heating far beyond what rock and dust alone could have caused. The harmless layer of stone that had sat quietly underground for eons became the mechanism that turned the sky lethal. The crater had closed. The gypsum's work was just beginning. The forest canopy ignited first, then the undergrowth, then everything else. Fires spread across every continent within hours. Not from a single point, but from a sky that was itself a source of ignition. The smoke rose in columns that joined the debris already choking the atmosphere above. The fossil record doesn't show who burned first. That absence is its own kind of evidence. Nothing on the surface could hide from this. Burrowing animals stood a chance. Underground, the temperature stayed survivable. Aquatic creatures in deep water had some insulation from the furnace above. The surface boiled, but the depths stayed dark and cold. But everything exposed to open air faced the same fate, and there was nowhere on land that wasn't exposed. The fires burned for days. The smoke joined the dust and the sulfur, and the atmosphere grew thick enough to block the sun entirely. Within weeks, a planet that had been tropical from pole to pole was dark and cooling fast. What came next made the fire look ordinary. The darkness lasted for years. The sulfur aerosols from that vaporized gypsum stayed suspended in the upper atmosphere, reflecting sunlight back into space before it could warm the surface below. The temperature dropped below freezing in places that hadn't seen frost in over 100 million years. The gypsum was still up there, still doing its work, and something about the cold that followed made sure almost nothing that survived the fire could survive what came next. The impact winter lasted for years, possibly decades. The sulfur aerosols from that vaporized gypsum stayed suspended in the upper atmosphere, reflecting sunlight before it could warm the surface below. A planet that had been tropical from pole to pole dropped below freezing in weeks and stayed there. The oceans acidified as sulfur dissolved into the water. Coral reefs, living structures that had built themselves over millions of years, dissolved in decades. The plankton at the base of every marine food chain collapsed, and everything above it followed. Freshwater turned toxic as sulfur rained back down in concentrations that poisoned every lake and river it touched. The water didn't just cool, it killed. The same debris that had cooked the sky now blocked the sun from reaching the ground. The material that was a furnace on re-entry became a shield against warmth once it settled. Two killing mechanisms, one unbroken chain, amplified by a mineral that turned one catastrophe into two. No dinosaur eggs after that boundary. No footprints or nests or juveniles. 75% of all species on Earth gone, not over millions of years, but in a window so narrow it barely registers in the rock. The light never came back. Then it did. But the world it returned to was unrecognizable. Colder, emptier, stripped of the creatures that had shaped it for 150 million years. The forests that survived were stunted and sparse, their canopies thin enough to see sky through. The ground was hard underfoot for the first time in geological memory. Some say the extinction was inevitable, regardless of where the asteroid struck. Others say the dinosaurs were already in decline. Neither explains the sulfur or why the survivors were almost exclusively small, the ones who could burrow, who could wait, who needed almost nothing. Where did the asteroid hit? A shallow sea over sulfur-rich gypsum. What would have happened if it had struck deep ocean instead? 70% of the planet's surface. If the rock had struck the ocean, the dinosaurs might still exist. 252 million years before the asteroid struck the Yucatan, something killed 95% of everything alive on Earth. No crater, no rock from space, no impact winter to explain what happened. Whatever destroyed that world came from inside the planet itself. And the first sign appeared at the bottom of the sea, in water that had no business being there.